The average American home contains over 300,000 different bacterial species, volatile organic compounds from furniture and paint that can cause headaches and fatigue, and air that is often 2 to 5 times more polluted than the air outside. Meanwhile, Japanese homes, even tiny apartments in central Tokyo, feel like breathing in a forest after rain. They are quieter, cleaner, and somehow more alive, despite being smaller and older. This is not luck. It is not minimalism as an aesthetic trend. It is a set of specific indoor plant habits, 10 of them, that transform a living space into what the Japanese call a healing environment. Some of these are so simple, they will shock you. Others are so genius, you will wonder why no one ever told you. Today, we are counting down from 10 to 1, starting with a habit that costs almost nothing and changes everything. Number 10. They treat one single plant like a family member. Walk into a typical Western plant lover's home and you will see a jungle. 15 plants on a shelf, 10 hanging from the ceiling, a fiddle leaf fig crammed into a dark corner because it looked good on Instagram. More is more. The Japanese approach is the opposite. Many households, particularly those following traditional principles, will have one primary plant, sometimes just one, positioned in the most important spot in the room. This plant is not decoration. It is a presence. It gets a name, or at least it gets spoken to. It is watered by the same person every time, often the eldest woman of the house. And that person knows exactly how many new leaves it grew this month, and whether the leaf tips are slightly brown from too much sun last Tuesday. I remember visiting a friend in a tiny apartment in Nagoya. Her grandmother lived with her, and in the corner of the main room was a single aspidistra, a cast iron plant, that had been in the family for over 40 years. The grandmother called it Midori-san, which is like saying Miss Green, a term of endearment and respect. Every morning she would slide open the shoji screen to let in light, and she would say good morning to Midori-san before she said good morning to anyone else. The plant was enormous, glossy, and so healthy it looked fake. But it was not fake, it was just loved. A 2022 study from the University of Hyogo found that interacting with a single plant for just 3 minutes a day reduced cortisol levels more significantly than being in a room full of plants you ignore. The mechanism is attention density. When you treat one plant as a living creature you are responsible for, your brain shifts from owning a thing to nurturing a relationship. You stop scanning a shelf of greenery and start seeing an individual. You notice the slight droop of a leaf that means thirst. You notice the tiny pale spot that might be the beginning of a pest. You notice the new shoot emerging from the soil, pale and hopeful, reaching toward the light. I tried this. I gave away 7 of my 9 plants to neighbors, and kept only a 30-year-old jade plant, and a peace lily I had nearly killed twice. I put the jade on a small wooden stand by the window where I drink coffee every morning. For the first week, I felt like my apartment was empty. The corners looked bare. My eyes kept searching for the familiar green shapes that were no longer there. I almost went out and bought replacements twice. But I held off. By week 3, I noticed something. That jade plant had gotten bigger. I could see every new leaf, every tiny red tip. I knew when it was thirsty because I was actually watching it. I noticed that the leaves got slightly softer to the touch when it needed water, and firm and plump when it was satisfied. I learned its language. Now, 2 years later, that plant is enormous, and I can tell you exactly how it changes with the seasons. It grows fast in spring, slows in the heat of August, and puts out a final flush of tiny leaves in October before resting for winter. I know this plant. It is not a decoration. It is a quiet green companion. You do not need a jungle. You need one green thing that knows you are there. Try it. Pick your favorite plant. Move everything else to another room for a month. Watch what happens to your attention. Watch how the relationship deepens when it is just the two of you. Number 9. They water in the morning, with intention, never on a schedule. Americans love automation. We set phone reminders. We buy self-watering pots with little gauges and reservoirs. We water every Sunday because that is plant care day, and we do it while we are thinking about something else entirely. Japanese plant care, deeply influenced by centuries of bonsai and ikebana practice, rejects the calendar. You water when the plant needs water, which you determine by touching the soil with your fingers, looking at the leaves, and understanding the weather. But the deeper habit is the timing. Morning watering is nearly universal. The logic is both practical and philosophical. Practically, morning watering allows the plant to absorb moisture before the heat of the day and prevents the root rot that comes from sitting in cold water overnight. Water that sits in the soil during the dark, cool night is an invitation for fungus, for bacteria, for the slow suffocation of roots. Morning water gives the plant a full day of light and warmth to drink and transpire, and use what it has been given. Philosophically, the act of watering in the quiet of the early morning is a form of ritualized attention. It is a way of checking in. You are not just dumping water from a plastic cup while scrolling your phone. You are observing. Is the soil pulling away from the pot edge, forming a dry gap? Is there a new unfurling leaf, still pale and tender? Is there a tiny pest on the underside of a stem, something you would miss if you were moving fast? This is not a chore. This is a daily practice of noticing, what Zen practitioners might call mindful attention to the present moment. You are not crossing an item off a to-do list. You are starting your day by caring for something other than yourself, which is one of the most grounding things a human can do. I used to be a Sunday waterer. My plants looked fine, I thought. A little yellow leaf here and there, a little droopiness by Friday, but fine. Then I spent 3 weeks in Kyoto, staying with a friend, whose mother had kept the same orchids alive for over a decade. Every morning at 6:30, she would fill a small copper watering can, walk to each plant, touch the soil with 2 fingers and either water or not. Some days she watered all of them. Some days she watered none. She never once checked a calendar. The watering can was small and beautiful, and the water came out in a gentle shower, not a harsh stream. She would stand there for a full minute with each plant, just looking. I asked her once how she knew when to water. She looked at me like I had asked how she knew when to breathe. I just know, she said. The plant tells me. I started doing this at home. I stopped setting reminders. I just look at my plants every morning while my coffee brews. I touch the soil. I lift the pot slightly to feel its weight, because a dry pot is noticeably lighter. I look at the leaves. Are they firm and glossy or slightly soft and dull? The difference is shocking. My plants are healthier. But more than that, I am calmer. That 3-minute morning check has become the most grounding part of my day. Before email, before news, before the demands of the world rush in. It is just me and the plants and the quiet of early morning. Number 8. They use moss as living mulch, and it changes the air you breathe. Western gardeners mulch with bark chips or gravel. It looks tidy. It suppresses weeds. It is dead material spread over living soil. Japanese indoor plant care, especially for larger specimen plants and bonsai, almost always features a top dressing of living moss. This is not just decorative. It is a functional, breathing layer that transforms the microclimate around the plant. A 2023 study from Chiba University's Graduate School of Horticulture found that a living moss layer on indoor plant soil reduced airborne dust particles in the immediate area by up to 43%. Moss is a natural biofilter. Its tiny leaves, called phyllids, are designed to trap particulate matter from the air. It absorbs carbon dioxide and releases oxygen constantly, not just during the day like most plants. Moss does not have the same photosynthetic cycle as vascular plants. It breathes all the time, day and night, making it a perfect indoor companion for bedrooms and living spaces. It also regulates soil moisture brilliantly, preventing the rapid drying that kills so many indoor plants in heated or air-conditioned homes. The moss acts like a living sponge. It holds water on the surface of the soil, releasing it slowly through evaporation, creating a humid microclimate right where the plant needs it most. The moss breathes. It tells you when the pot is dry because it changes color slightly, going from deep emerald to a softer sage green, almost silvery at the tips. It is a living humidity gauge sitting right on top of your soil. When the moss is bright green and springy to the touch, the plant is hydrated. When it looks dull and feels crispy, it is time to water. I bought a small tray of sheet moss from a garden center 2 years ago. It came in a flat, damp square, like a tiny piece of forest floor that had been rolled up and shipped. I pressed it gently onto the soil of my peace lily, tucking the edges in around the stems. Within a month, the moss had rooted and spread. It crept over the soil surface, sending out tiny tendrils. And then it started growing up the sides of the pot just slightly, like a green velvet collar. Now, touching that moss is part of my morning check. I press my fingertips into it gently. It feels cool and soft, like a tiny forest floor. The air around that plant smells different too, earthy and clean, like after a light rain. There is a word in Japanese for the smell of earth after rain, petrichor, and a moss-covered pot releases that scent in miniature every time you water. If you have one special plant, the one from Habit 10, give it a living moss collar. You will be amazed at how much more alive the whole corner of the room feels. Number 7. They hang plants at eye level, not from the ceiling. The Western impulse with hanging plants is to put them up high, often in a macrame sling near the ceiling, where they trail down dramatically. It looks beautiful in photographs. The vines cascade. The light catches the leaves from above. But it creates a visual relationship where the plant is above you, out of your direct line of sight. Something you look up at occasionally, rather than something you share space with. You crane your neck to see it. You forget to water it because it is literally out of sight, out of mind. Japanese interiors, particularly those influenced by traditional tea houses and the concept of borrowed scenery, position plants at the eye level of a seated person. A small bonsai on a low table, its trunk and branches exactly at the height of someone kneeling on a tatami mat. An orchid on a windowsill, at exactly the height of someone sitting on the floor or a low sofa. A fern placed on a short wooden step stool, its fronds brushing the air right where your gaze naturally falls. The effect is profound. When a plant is at your eye level, you make eye contact with it. You notice it. You feel companioned by it rather than overlooked by it. This is not just poetry. Research on biophilic design has consistently shown that visual connection to plants at eye level triggers a stronger parasympathetic nervous system response than plants positioned peripherally. Your body actually relaxes more when the green thing is right there in front of you, not hanging somewhere above your head. Your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens. You are, in a measurable physiological sense, calmer. I rearranged my living room after learning this. I took down all my hanging planters, the ones that had been dangling from hooks in the ceiling for years. I placed my plants on small wooden stands, a low bookshelf, and directly on the floor in heavy ceramic pots. The first thing I noticed was that guests commented on the plants more. They would sit down on the sofa and immediately say something about the jade plant or the fern. The second thing I noticed was that I felt less like I was living in a museum of plants and more like I was living with them. The room felt grounded. The plants felt like inhabitants, not exhibits. Try it. Lower your plants. Let them sit with you, not above you. Put them on a low stool, a stack of books, the floor. See how different the room feels when the green is right there, at the level of your heart. Number 6. They rotate the pot a quarter turn every single week. This sounds obsessive. It sounds like the kind of thing only a plant influencer with too much time would do. But in Japan, this is just what you do. It is as automatic as wiping down the kitchen counter or sweeping the entryway. The reason is simple. Indoor plants grow toward the light. Every leaf, every stem, every shoot bends and reaches for the window. If you never rotate them, they lean, they become lopsided, they stretch awkwardly toward the light source, and eventually they look unbalanced and stressed. One side gets full and lush. The other side gets sparse and leggy. The plant looks like it is trying to escape the room. A quarter turn every week, always in the same direction, ensures even growth. A symmetrical shape, and a plant that looks calm rather than desperate. The light hits every side equally over the course of a month. No side is neglected, no side is overexposed, but the deeper effect is on you, not the plant. That small weekly act, turning each pot just a few degrees, is a moment of physical connection. You touch the pot, you feel its weight, you see the plant from a new angle. You notice things. A new leaf emerging on the backside that you had not seen. A slight discoloration that might need attention. A tiny weed seedling that has blown in from somewhere and taken root in the soil. This is not about perfect symmetry. It is about the rhythm of small, consistent care. The Japanese have a word for this kind of incremental, patient attention. A concept embedded in practices like Kaizen, continuous small improvement. It is the opposite of the Western binge and purge cycle of ignoring our plants for 3 weeks and then drowning them in a panic on a Saturday afternoon. That cycle is stressful for the plant and stressful for you. The quarter turn is the antidote. I started doing this with a cheap, lazy Susan under my largest plant. Every Sunday I spin it a quarter turn clockwise. It takes 3 seconds. The ceramic pot makes a soft grinding sound against the wood of the lazy Susan. But it has become a tiny ritual, a marker of the week passing, a moment of noticing. The plant is fuller and straighter than it has ever been. Its shape is round and balanced, like a green sculpture. And I feel like a slightly more competent human, someone who can keep a small promise to a living thing. Number 5. They grow something they can eat, even in the smallest apartment. The ornamental houseplant is a Western obsession. We want the rarest monstera, the most variegated leaf, the plant that looks stunning on a shelf and requires nothing from us but admiration. We collect plants like art objects, valuing them for their appearance alone. Japanese homes, even the most design-conscious ones, almost always include something edible. A pot of shiso on the kitchen windowsill, its serrated leaves catching the morning light. A tiny mitsuba plant growing in a ceramic cup, its delicate 3-lobed leaves ready to be snipped into soup. A tray of microgreens tucked next to the rice cooker, a miniature field of green that gets harvested with scissors every few days. This changes the entire energy of plant care. When you grow something you can eat, the relationship shifts from passive admiration to active participation. You are not just looking at the plant, you are waiting for it. You are planning to harvest a few leaves for your soup tonight. You are noticing how the flavor changes with the season, sweeter in the cool spring, more intense in the heat of summer. You are part of a cycle of growth and harvest and regrowth that has sustained humans for thousands of years. A 2021 study from the University of Tokyo found that urban residents who grew even a single edible plant reported significantly higher levels of daily happiness and lower levels of anxiety than those who kept only ornamental plants. The mechanism is anticipation and reward. Your brain gets a tiny dopamine hit every time you snip a leaf and eat it. It is a feedback loop of care and nourishment. You cared for the plant. The plant nourished you. You feel grateful and motivated to care for it more. I started with a single shiso plant in a 6-inch pot. Shiso is a Japanese herb, a little like mint and basil having a baby, with broad green leaves and a flavor that is somewhere between cumin and cinnamon and fresh grass. It is nearly impossible to kill. I put it on my kitchen counter, right next to the cutting board. Within a week, I was adding leaves to my eggs in the morning, shredding them over my salads at lunch, dropping them into my water glass in the afternoon. The plant gave me something back. That changed everything. I stopped seeing it as a decoration and started seeing it as a partner. Now I grow 3 edible things year-round, rotating with the seasons. Shiso in summer, mitsuba in spring and fall, and a pot of sturdy chives that survives even the darkest weeks of winter. It makes my kitchen feel like a tiny farm. It makes me feel less like a consumer and more like someone who participates in the food chain. Someone who is not entirely dependent on the grocery store for every calorie. Even if you have a studio apartment with one window, grow one thing you can eat. It does not have to be Japanese. Basil, chives, lettuce, a single cherry tomato plant in a deep pot. Just grow something that ends up on your plate. The first time you eat a leaf you grew yourself, you will understand why this habit is so powerful. Number 4. They use water trays to create humidity clouds, not misters. Americans love gadgets. We buy electric humidifiers with digital displays and replaceable filters. We buy fine mist spray bottles in sleek aluminum casings. We spritz our ferns obsessively, 3 or 4 times a day, and then wonder why the leaves still turn brown at the edges. Japanese indoor plant care, especially in the dry winter months when heaters are running, relies on a much older, simpler technology. A shallow tray filled with water and pebbles, placed under or near the plant. The water evaporates slowly, creating a localized bubble of humidity around the plant. No electricity, no misting, no fuss. The tray sits there quietly, doing its work, and you refill it every few days when the water level gets low. This works better than misting for a simple physical reason. Misting raises humidity for about 5 minutes. The tiny water droplets land on the leaves, sit there briefly, and then evaporate into the dry air of the room. The humidity spikes and then crashes back down. The plant experiences a series of tiny floods and droughts all day long. A water tray provides constant, steady evaporation for hours or even days. The water molecules rise slowly from the surface of the tray, creating a stable dome of moist air that envelops the plant. It mimics the way a forest floor stays humid, not from sudden rain showers, but from the slow, endless release of moisture from soil and decaying leaves, and the breath of a million tiny organisms. Many Japanese homes also place their humidity-loving plants, like ferns and mosses, in the bathroom or near the kitchen sink, using the natural humidity of daily life rather than fighting against the dry air of the rest of the house. A fern on the back of the toilet, a moss ball hanging near the shower, an orchid on the kitchen windowsill where the steam from cooking rises. It is about working with the environment you have, not buying a machine to fight it. I stopped misting my plants 2 years ago. I bought a few simple terracotta trays, the kind that go under pots to catch excess water, filled them with small river stones from a garden center, and keep them topped up with water. The stones are important. They elevate the pot above the water line, so the roots are not sitting in moisture, and they increase the surface area for evaporation. My fern, which was perpetually crispy at the edges, with brown tips on every frond, is now lush and green. The fronds uncurl perfectly, without a single brown edge. The air around my plants smells faintly of wet stone, which is one of the most calming scents on earth. And I no longer have to remember to spritz anything. The water does the work. I just refill the trays when they are dry, which takes about 30 seconds. Number 3. They repot not on a schedule but by reading the roots. Western plant care advice is obsessed with annual repotting. Every spring, we are told, you should repot your plants. Fresh soil, bigger pot. It is on every plant care checklist, in every beginner's guide, repeated so often that it has become dogma. This is often terrible advice. Many plants, particularly slow-growing indoor specimens like snake plants, ZZ plants, and many cacti and succulents, are perfectly happy being slightly root-bound. Their roots fill the pot, which means the soil dries quickly and evenly, reducing the risk of rot. Repotting, too, often stresses the plant, damages fine root hairs that are responsible for most water and nutrient absorption, and can set growth back by months. A plant that was thriving can suddenly decline after a repot, dropping leaves, yellowing, sulking for an entire season. Japanese plant caretakers, especially those trained in bonsai or traditional Niwaki pruning, repot only when the plant signals it is ready. The signals are specific, and you can learn to read them. Roots circling the bottom of the pot and poking out of drainage holes, visible when you lift the pot and look underneath. Water running straight through the pot without being absorbed, indicating the soil has been almost entirely replaced by roots and there is nothing left to hold moisture. The plant becoming top-heavy and tipping over, because the root ball is too small and dense to anchor the weight of the foliage. A noticeable slowdown in growth during what should be the growing season, when the plant should be pushing out new leaves but instead seems stalled. These are the conversations the plant is having with you. Your job is to listen, not to follow a calendar. When a Japanese plant lover does repot, it is a careful, considered ritual. The right soil mix for that specific plant, often blended by hand from kokedama, pumice, and composted bark, each ingredient chosen for drainage and aeration. A pot only slightly larger than the previous one, maybe an inch wider in diameter. Roots gently teased apart with fingers or a chopstick, never hacked at with shears unless they are dead. The whole process is done with the focus and care of a small surgery, not a rushed chore on a Saturday afternoon. I stopped my annual spring repotting madness a few years ago. Now I have plants that have been in the same pot for 3 years, and they are thriving. They are not suffering, they are not begging for more space, they are content. I check the roots in spring by gently sliding the plant out of its pot, taking a look at the root ball, and sliding it back in if everything looks healthy. Most of the time it does. The roots are white and firm, not brown and mushy. The soil smells earthy, not sour. The plant is fine, it does not need a new home. It just needs me to pay attention. Number 2. They place one plant in the jenkin to cleanse the energy of the outside world. The jenkin is the traditional Japanese entryway, a small sunken area where you remove your shoes before stepping up into the home. It is a sacred threshold, the boundary between the chaotic, dirty outside world and the clean, peaceful interior. The outside is full of noise and exhaust and the stress of other people. The inside is quiet and orderly and safe. The jenkin is the space where you transition from one to the other. Almost every Japanese home places something living or beautiful in the jenkin. Often it is a single plant, an ikebana arrangement, or a small bonsai on a narrow wooden shelf. This is not decoration. It is a ritual object. The plant serves as a visual and energetic cleanser. You see it as you remove your shoes. You pause, you take a breath. You leave the stress of the commute, the noise of the city, the grime of the outside world at the door. The plant absorbs that transition. It welcomes you home. It reminds you that you are entering a different kind of space, a space of rest and restoration. In Western homes, we typically walk straight into a living room or a hallway with no transition at all. The front door opens directly onto the couch, the television, the pile of mail. The outside comes right in with us. Our stress comes right in with us. We never pause. We never cleanse. We track the energy of the workday right onto the kitchen floor and wonder why we cannot relax. I do not have a traditional Jenkin. My apartment door opens into a narrow hallway that leads immediately to the living room. But I created a small entryway ritual after learning this. I placed a single, beautiful snake plant on a low wooden stool right next to my front door. The snake plant is perfect for this because it thrives in low light, which entryways often have, and its upright, sword-like leaves have a strong protective presence. When I come home, I take off my shoes, I look at the plant, and I take one deep breath before I walk into the rest of my apartment. I let my shoulders drop, I let my jaw unclench. I leave the frustration of the delayed train or the difficult meeting outside the door. It sounds absurdly simple, it is. But that one breath, that one moment of seeing something green and alive before I check my phone or turn on the lights, has shifted the entire feeling of coming home. My apartment feels like a sanctuary now, not just a place where I sleep and store my things. Put a plant by your door. It does not need to be fancy. It does not need to be rare. It just needs to be alive and waiting for you, a green sentinel at the threshold. Number 1. They practice kokedama, the art of the moss ball, which eliminates the pot entirely. This is the deepest, most transformative habit on this list. Kokedama is a traditional Japanese technique where a plant's roots are wrapped in a ball of soil and clay, then covered entirely in living moss and bound with string. There is no pot. The plant floats. It can sit on a beautiful ceramic dish, hang from a simple thread, or rest on a piece of driftwood. It is pure plant, pure moss, pure life. The practice originated from the bonsai tradition, specifically a style called nirai, where a plant was removed from its pot and displayed on a tray to showcase the root structure. Kokedama takes that idea and makes it a permanent, living sculpture. The effect on a room is difficult to describe. A potted plant, no matter how beautiful, is still a plant in a container. There is a separation, a boundary between the living thing and the manufactured object. The pot is made of ceramic or plastic, fired in a kiln or molded in a factory. The plant is alive, breathing, growing. The two things do not quite belong together. Kokedama removes that boundary. The plant seems to hover. It feels more alive, more present, more like a creature than a decoration. When you walk into a room with a kokedama, your eye goes straight to it. It is a sphere of green, suspended in space, and it looks like it grew there naturally. Caring for a kokedama is a different relationship entirely. You do not water it from above with a watering can. You submerge the entire moss ball in a bowl of water once or twice a week, and watch it bubble as the moss and roots drink. The air trapped in the soil escapes in a stream of tiny silver bubbles. When the bubbling stops, the plant has had enough. Then you lift it out, let it drip for a moment over the bowl, and return it to its place. It is a full sensory experience. The cool, wet moss against your palms, the sound of the water dripping back into the bowl, the weight of the ball in your hand, heavy with water, a solid, satisfying heft. You cannot be distracted while caring for a kokedama. It demands your full attention for those few minutes. You have to hold it, feel it, judge when it is saturated, and place it back gently. I made my first kokedama 3 years ago with a small fern and some sheet moss from a garden center. I mixed the soil with water and clay, formed a ball around the fern's roots, wrapped it in moss, and tied it with wax string. It took me 45 minutes, my hands covered in mud up to the wrists, and I was sure it would fall apart in a week. It is still alive. It hangs near my kitchen window, suspended from a simple hook by a length of clear fishing line, and every time I take it down to soak it, I feel like I am doing something ancient and important. Guests ask about it constantly. They walk into the kitchen, stop, and say, "What is that?" It is the most commented on thing in my home. If you adopt only one habit from this list, make it this one. Try making a single kokedama. There are countless tutorials online. It costs almost nothing, just some soil, some moss, and some string. And it will change the way you see plants forever. You will never look at a pot the same way again. These 10 habits are not about having a beautiful home for Instagram. They are about transforming your relationship with the living things you share your space with. Japanese indoor plant care is not a set of chores. It is a daily practice of attention, of noticing, of small, consistent acts of care that add up to a home that feels like a sanctuary rather than a storage unit. You do not need a bigger house. You do not need more plants. You need a different way of seeing the ones you have. You need to slow down, to touch the soil, to watch the leaves, to let the plants become companions rather than decorations. Try one habit this week. Just one: the moss, the morning watering, the single plant by the door. See what shifts. The plants will be fine either way, but you might find that you are the one who has been waiting to be cared for, and that caring for something green and alive is the gentlest way to start caring for yourself.